So hello everyone, in our continuation of discussion of control structure, so now we are going to talk about something called as a conditional statement, right? Conditional statement. Now, as we discussed earlier, they help us in controlling the flow of execution of the code. So we'll have a bit of discussion and then we'll jump over to coding session, right? So basic conditional statement, right? So the idea is pretty simple. So you have something called a condition, right, based on whether it is true or false, we'll execute some more steps, right? So similar kind of a behavior, right? So imagine I have a value a is equal to 10. Now if a is greater than 5, we'll do something, right? And if a is less than 5, we'll do something else, right? So conditional statement gives us this ability, right? So as you can see, now we have something called as an if condition. So the generic structure, so the basic structure is if, then we have something called as a condition, right? Now a conditional statement can be a combination of relational and logical operators, but the thing is that it should evaluate to either true and false. Then we have something called as an indent. Indent is very much important. We'll have indent, then couple of statements. If this particular condition is true, only then this statement gets executed, else they don't get executed, right? So we'll jump over to the code to get an idea of it. So this is the basic structure. We have if, then we have a condition, and then couple of statements. Now there are other variants also. We'll look into them individually, right? So here I am in my Jupyter notebook. So imagine I'll try and write it. So I have a variable x which I'm assigning to 10. Now if x is greater than maybe 5, then I'll do something. Print within inverted comma the value is greater than 5, right? So now if we execute it, so as we can see, this particular print statement gets executed. Why? Because this condition, that is x is greater than 5, is true. Only when it is true it gets executed. Now imagine if I make it 4, right? In that scenario, let's check what happens. So we can see that this particular print statement doesn't get executed, right? So because what? X is not greater than 5 because it is 4. So this condition evaluates to false and this particular statement doesn't get executed. Now there are certain things that has to be kept in mind. If is a keyword and this is a conditional statement. That means what? It must evaluate to either true or false. We cannot just put random values and it will not work, right? And colon is required. And another important thing is called as an indent, right? This particular indent is very much important. Now this tells the program about the belongingness. So that means because of this indent, this particular print statement belongs to if, right? Again, this particular indent tells this particular statement belongs to the if conditional. Now if I remove it, you can see if I remove it, obviously it will throw me an error. There is a different idea. But now it will try and sequentially execute it, right? So we don't want that. So we'll hit a tab. Either we can do a tab or 4 spaces. That is the right value for indent. Does it make sense? Again, I can also write a pass in it. Now pass helps us to make an empty conditional structure. That is whether it is true or false. Now if it is true, it will go into this pass statement. Now pass means do nothing, just skip. It's an empty statement, right? So it will get executed. So if I execute it, right, whatever is the value doesn't matter because this print statement doesn't belong to it, right? So in that scenario it will get printed anyway, right? So again, indents are very much important. Indents makes a particular statement belong to a group, right? And that is how it is. So now another variation is using a condition is elif, so we'll discuss about it. Imagine that okay, if x is greater than 5, then we will do this, but there might be a scenario that okay, if x is greater than maybe 3, then we will do something. So in that scenario, we cannot put multiple condition in one single statement, right? So what we are going to do, we are going to write an elif condition. Now elif and if will be on the same level, they will not be nested inside, right? Elif, it's similar to else if, right? So if I do that, x is greater than 3, so what we can do, can write another print statement. The value is greater than 3. Now it might be a scenario that everything seems naive. Now we are trying to demonstrate the idea of programming, right? We are not actually going into something productive, but the thing is that this particular thing is very much required in other programming languages, and every programming language will have some sort of a construct. Whether you're writing a very simple program to a very complex project, you see we are going to require some sort of a conditional statement, right? So now if I do that, execute it, so as we can see, these statements 1 2 3 4 5, these 5 statements don't get executed in a linear fashion. Now what is it's actually doing, it is checking whether it is true or false. So x is greater than 5, it is false, so this particular statement doesn't get executed and it will jump over here. Now it will check whether x is greater than 3, which is pretty obvious, and because of that it has printed that okay, the value is greater than 3. Does it make sense? Right, so that's why we are having the value is greater than 3. Now imagine I move the value to 2. In that scenario, neither this is true, neither this is true, right? Both of them are false. So in that scenario, if I execute it, you can see that I don't actually have any output because both the condition are false, and the statement which belongs to it actually doesn't get executed. So I can write an else clause which will execute it by default, right? So I'll write another else clause which says the values are less than 3 and 5, right? So does it make sense? So in this scenario, when both the statements are false, we'll jump to else clause. Now you can we can see that okay, else doesn't have a condition. You can put a condition in if, you can put a condition in elif, but we cannot put anything in else. That means whenever all the preceding statement or conditions are false, else get executed by default, right? So as expected, that is how it works. So this is the basic idea about a conditional statement, right? An elif and an else condition. Now point to consider is that we cannot write individual else or elif. We can write individual if, but we cannot write elif and else, right? So next we will continue into something called as a nested ifs are also possible. So again, this was a basic idea on conditional statement: if, elif and else. These three things are possible. Again, if can be used standalone, elif and else cannot be used standalone, right? So we'll go into something called as a nested if. So imagine I'll declare another variable, similar variable with a value 3. So if I have x, imagine that x is less than 5, right? It is fine, okay, x is less than 5. So but I want to check something else also. If x is greater than 2, just for the sake of conversation and for the programming completion, and we can see that because it's an IDE, every indents are being generated by default, but if you are on a notepad or something of that sort, then you have to put indents, and we discussed about the importance of indents. So I can write print the value of x is less than 5 but greater than 3, greater than 2. And if I execute it as usual, this gets executed, right? How come? So as usual, we'll go into the code. So the first statement is that x is equal to 3. Okay, so as x is less than 5, yes, it is true because it is 3, right? And then we move over to the next conditional, which says x is greater than 2, which is also true, right? So that's why this particular statement gets executed. But now I can link another else statement, else, or I can also put an elif. It's up to me, but I'll just simply put an else. Again, I'll tab print. So I'll write something, the value of x is less than 5 but not greater than 2, right? Now again, if I execute it, let's see what happens. Oh, I have a problem somewhere. Yeah, I missed a colon, right? So we need a colon in each and every statement. Do remember that. I'll execute. So again, this particular statement gets executed. Why? Because the value is 3. So now let's increase the let's decrease the value. X is greater than 2. So let us make it 1. Let's see what happens. Now it says the value of x is less than 5 but not greater than 2. So does it make sense? Yeah, I guess so. Huh? So now I can connect another else. Alright, print. So alright, the value of x is greater than 5, right? So now it's an idea of a nestation, right? So what we have done, we have one conditional statement, and within that particular conditional statement we've added another conditional statement, right? So this is an idea of nested conditional statement, that is putting one conditional statement within another. Now there is no limit on how many conditional statements we can put, and we can put as many as we want. Now interestingly, we have to know that this else is connected to this if condition, and this particular else is connected to this if condition, and because of this nestation our program can understand it. So it's very much important to take care of the nested value. So now we are going to change the value. So this will evaluate to false, and as it evaluates to false, this part doesn't even get considered, right? So we'll just simply jump over to the else condition and let's see whether it works or not. Yeah, it works. Okay, it was greater than, right? So somewhere around that. So we'll make some typo changes. Anyway, so that was the basic idea regarding conditional statement. Now for further information, do check out the blog where you can find more theories and its secrets, right? And even a program is being given to find if the entered number is positive, negative or 0, right? So it's a very simple program. Go through it. All it does is checks whether the number is greater than 0 or not, or less than 0 or not. Based on that, whether it is positive, negative or 0, it's being evaluated, right? So again, if you don't understand anything, do comment and subscribe to the channel, and have a nice day.